Welcome to the Cardboard Crash Course. My name's Ethan, and we're talking about the top 30 misunderstood rules in Twilight Imperium. This is not going to be in any specific order, and I originally intended this to only be a top 10, but because of your community insights, this turned into a top 30 with enough content to make a part 2. So if you want to drop more that you don't see in this video into the comment section below, I'll absolutely consider it for that part 2. I'm taking posts from all over the internet, including a Reddit post that I made, a community post that I made on YouTube, as well as my Discord server and my Patreon, both of which you can find in the description down below. Unless it's coming from me or another member of the Cardboard Crash Course, I'm going to have the post that I'm talking about up on screen as I'm talking about it. I will be paraphrasing them, however. This is either because the rest of the content overlapped with somebody else's post that I wanted to highlight, or because I wanted to take the rest of it and include it in the part 2 video. Trust me when I say that all 30 of these things at my gaming table have come up with new players in one situation or another. And actually, it's not just new players. Returning players or even myself have learned a thing or two from all of these comments, and I hope you do too. So without further ado, let's jump into my first one and head on from there. My first one is that combat is mandatory, but abilities that happen mostly during combat that involve dice are not mandatory and are completely optional. This includes Space Cannon, Anti-Fighter Barrage, and Bombardment. So you're able to negotiate the use, whether or not you use one of these abilities with somebody else at the table. But even if they're your alliance, you cannot negotiate the use of actual combat dice. The only way combat doesn't happen is with a skilled retreat action card, and that's something what we'll talk about later on in the video. Combat is absolutely something that you cannot skip, but these individual abilities can be turned off by the player if it's decided upon ahead of time. Speaking of combat, from Reddit, Brash submitted that only one secret objective that happens during the action phase can be scored in a single combat. Each separate combat can score an action phase secret objective, and you can score as many as you want per phase, but only one can be scored per combat, and this player says that it messed him up 1 or 2 times. Jumping away from combat, on my Discord, Willie Jedi submitted that the leadership strategy card secondary does not have to have a command token spent on it. This would completely undermine the ability of that command card in the first place, because it's the one that gives you more command tokens. However, I completely understand where new players are coming from when they get tripped up on this, because all of the other strategy cards have to do with spending a token of some kind. And this is the only one that doesn't do it. So when a new player sits down and they see 7 things that are one way and 1 thing another, I understand where the confusion comes from. Bailey, one of my other players from the Cardboard Crash Course, gets tripped up on fleet size limitations. He says that fleet size restrictions only apply to main ships, not fighters. Fighters are instead carried by the total capacity limit of other ships in the system. Those larger ships are what are tracked by the fleet size limit, and those ones have a combined capacity value within each hex that can hold both fighters as well as ground forces like infantry and mechs. Unless the fighters are upgraded, they're carried by the larger ships, and those larger ships are the ones that are checked. Big Al Cappuccino on Patreon wants to point out production value versus production cost. Production value is the exact amount of things that can be built on each individual unit with production. That is the all-capital production ability. Production on space docks is usually, in most cases, equal to 2 more than the resource value of the planet that it's on. So if you had a resource value planet of 3, then that space dock would be able to make 5 total things, pieces of plastic. You still have to pay for them separately, and those can be the same resources from that planet, any resources from any planets, or even trade goods that stand in as resources. I'm going to move on for now because there's a couple more clarifications that we have from different people down the line. From YouTube, Darwin Apollo 6067 says, "The system you activate is the destination, not the origin for movement." This gets new players tripped up all the time. The activated system is the system that everything is happening in. That includes different systems' ships moving to the activated system, not ships moving from the activated system outwards. He also specifies in the same comment that yes, Twilight Imperium is very hard to teach. Trust me, I know. I've done it a lot. Also from YouTube, Waterwaffle, which is a really hard name to say and I had to do this take like 30 times, says that the secondary of warfare is only one of the space docks in your home system, not every single space dock there, like you would normally do during activating that system. When you activate a system during a tactical action, you can produce with any number of units that have production in that system. But when you do the secondary of warfare, only one of those can be done. Of course, the reason why this is powerful anyway is because you don't actually have to place the token in that system, which doesn't lock the ships down from moving out of it. On Discord, Old Man Jai says that production happens during the same tactical action as the movement that brought those ships into the system. This can be especially important with the Clan of Sar's space docks because they can actually move alongside ships during that tactical action and then produce in that system. But it's still important to everybody, because imagine, you activate a system with a space dock in it. You can move any number of ships into that system, perform any combats if necessary, and then produce as well. A lot of people use the tactical action to just activate a system, not move anything in, not perform any combats, but simply just to produce. But keep in mind that every step of the tactical action still happens up to that point. So if you wanted to move something in, you could. The next one is from me, and it's that players can still perform non-component action cards while passed. If you've passed during the action phase, you can still perform things like sabotages and other cards that would affect other players during the action phase. Many players forget this, and this is why the Yssaril is so powerful, because they say that other players cannot play any action cards once they're passed, which means that they can just have free reign over the action phase if they're the only ones left, and not have to worry about anything getting sabotaged. This moves me to Reddit with a submission from E. Lowell. They say that you can still perform secondaries of strategy cards while you pass. You are not limited to skipping those strategy card secondaries after you pass. It is the only thing that you can actively do after you pass. As well as this, the turn that you pass, whether or not you perform an action, you can do at the start of turn abilities, like the legendary card planet abilities, as well as transactions with other players. So you could quickly make a transaction, activate your legendary planet ability card, and then end your turn and pass for the round without even performing an action. Combat Walrus on Discord says that the diplomacy strategy card messes up their group a little bit. The diplomacy needs to be used and everybody's token be placed in a system where the person with diplomacy controls, not just any system on the board. On top of this, the token that gets placed from other people comes from their reinforcements, not from their command sheet. They said that they get a little messed up because sometimes people take it from their strategy pool and place it in that system. But you do not need to spend a token when somebody else activates the primary ability of diplomacy. You just need to take it out of your reserves, called reinforcements, and place it in that system. Their group made this ability a lot more punishing than it is. Adam from the Cardboard Crash Course says that 2 players that it's not their turn cannot resolve transactions. Only the active player may resolve transactions with other players. Now, you can of course still talk with your group. I'm not some kind of crazy person that would keep you from talking and making deals while it's not your turn, but actually performing the transaction needs to be held until you're the active player, or the player that you're transacting with is the active player. This moves me into a really good one from Discord submitted by Nathan H. He says that relics cannot be traded. The only things that can be traded are with an active player and another player, and those include relic fragments, trade goods, commodities, and up to 1 promissory note. And you can accept those same things in return. On top of this, Nathan wants to clarify that that active player can only perform 1 transaction with each player during their turn. Yeah, this definitely messes up my group a lot, and a lot of people think that they can trade relics since they can trade relic fragments, but that's just not the case. Once you actually have the relic face up in your play area, it can't be traded. Going back to Patreon, another submission from Big Al Cappuccino is that any spend objectives, like spending 10 trade goods or 5 resources or whatever it is, has to actually be done when that objective is being scored, not just everything that has happened during the action phase. So for example, that stage 2 where you need to spend 10 trade goods, you cannot just spend 10 trade goods during the round and then score that. the 10 trade goods actually have to be spent on the objective. You have to hold them until the status phase and get rid of them as you score that objective. This messed me up personally the first time I played. Now, it hasn't messed me up for a while, but I always have to clarify it every single time to new players. So keep in mind that the new players might be thinking the other way, and unfortunately that just sets them behind in point tempo, and it's really sad to see. I really hope this video helps out those new or returning players not make these mistakes, because I want you to be in the running just as much as any experienced player is. All submissions from the Patreon have been recorded. If you want to support the Cardboard Crash Course, it is sponsored by that Patreon, and you can find it in the description down below. No matter your Patreon tier, you'll get Discord benefits, and middle and higher tiers get things like physical products in the mail, as well as access to the Patreon polls and things like participating in this video here. If you want to become a Cardboard Crash Course professor, that means that you really love the channel, and I'll work directly with you with getting some content that comes from your mind up on the channel. Thank you very much to all the people who are currently patrons. Let's move on. From Reddit, the Waldo 2019 says, each person can score each public objective, not just the first person to get to it in initiative order. I'm sorry, but if your group was truly messed up with this, that sounds like the game took 24 hours. On the YouTube post, ZeroJep wants to clarify the difference between win abilities and after abilities on action cards and faction abilities during the agenda phase. I'm going to talk about the general order of operations with action cards right after this, but yes, all when the agenda is revealed abilities happen before after the agenda is revealed abilities. Okay, so the order of operations. Alvis1218 wants to specify the order of operations difference between the action phase and the agenda/strategy phase. The initiative order coming from the active player is what matters during the action phase. So if there's multiple timings that happen at the exact same time, those abilities are resolved in initiative order during the action phase, starting with the active player. However, if there's multiple abilities that need to be resolved in either the strategy phase or agenda phase, then it's speaker order, starting with the speaker that matters. So if someone during the action phase has diplomacy and somebody else has imperial, that means that the diplomacy player has a lower initiative, and if they both had abilities that would trigger at the same time, the diplomacy player would do theirs before the imperial player. However, if the imperial player was the speaker, then they would go first during either the agenda or the strategy phase if multiple abilities triggered at the same time. Over on YouTube, APZR2KE had a really good write-up of a lot of different common vocabulary that's messed up with new players and experienced players mixed together. I did want to point out one specific thing from their comment though. They said that unit upgrade technologies do not count as prerequisites towards other technologies. This can mess people up a little bit because there's symbols on both the bottom left side as well as the bottom right side of the cards. The bottom left side is the cost and prerequisites that they look at while being researched, and the bottom right side are the prerequisites that they give you for other technology researches. Unit upgrade technologies do not have anything in the bottom right side, and as such don't provide anything for prerequisites. They're kind of like an end-of-the-line situation where they cost something but do not give you something in return, except for the actual ability itself. Jumping back to Adam from the Cardboard Crash Course, he has a clarification on the production cost of fighters and infantry. Fighters and infantry have two little symbols next to their cost, which means that they make two things per one resource cost that is spent on them. However, they actually count as two separate pieces of plastic, which means that they count for 2 towards the production limit of that space dock. So if you can make 5 total things, spending 1 on 2 separate infantry costs as 2 of the 5 things you can make. This is not something that usually totally gets messed up in our games, but it is a question that comes up pretty often. Speaking of which, just clarifying production was a big thing. Lion in the Trenches, Sir Francelot, and Captain Perfect all said on YouTube that production is complex and difficult. The amount of stuff you can make is equal to your production value. The total cost is whatever you can pay in resources and trade goods. I know this is a repeat, but I'm just drilling it into the new players' minds because this is unnecessarily complicated. Trust me, it's not just you, it was me the first like 5 games. It takes a minute to get that math together, especially when you're already thinking about 100 different things. So because so many people said that this was a problem, I'm gonna say it a couple of times. Speaking of which, also from YouTube, Andre J says, production in all caps is different than produce something. For an example, SAR's chaos mapping technology and the sling relay technology do not work with the Sarween tools tech. This is because when something simply just asks you to produce something, that's not necessarily activating the production ability on that unit. This is also unnecessarily complicated and, in my opinion, should be changed in a future expansion. Zachy U wants to say that it is not a draw when you retreat from combat. Only the skilled retreat action card is considered a draw. If you retreat from combat, you are considered the loser in all situations. This is a strange clarification, and skilled retreat, the action card, does not count as retreating for any situation. Retreating is different than doing a skilled retreat. Skilled retreat actually allows you to completely end the combat, never have to roll dice, and completely get out of there, causing it to be a draw. But moving into the other related one, retreating from combat is something that Nidius wants to clarify. They say that announcing retreats in combat does not mean that you skip the roll dice step. You still have to fight one last time before you exit the combat. This is true. If you announce retreats, that step is before the roll dice step, and then after the roll dice step is the actual retreat step. So if you're announcing retreats a little too late and everything gets destroyed in the roll dice step, then it's too late for you, you're not actually retreating anything. You have to announce it when you feel good enough to get out of there after fighting one last time. It's kind of like your guns are pointed backwards and you're still shooting a couple more times as you're leaving the system, and you still have a chance to get blown up. Imagine a Star Destroyer entering hyperdrive, but it gets blown up right before it actually escapes. Jumping over to the YouTube post, Who is the Doctor says that there are a difference between promissory notes that are in your play area and the ones in your hand. Promissory notes that are given to you from other players that are in your hand can be traded to other players without that original player's knowledge. However, if a promissory note like Support for the Throne instructs you to place it face up in your play area, it cannot be traded. This is similar to that relic rule we talked about earlier. Who is the Doctor also says that non-neighbors can participate in transactions during the agenda phase. Normally during the action phase, you can only participate in a transaction with somebody if you're their direct neighbor, which means that you have ships in a system that is adjacent to a system with another player's ships. However, during the agenda phase, this neighbor thing is completely ignored and all players can make transactions with all players. If this is ignored, a lot of players will abstain from agendas because they do not realize that they can make transactions in the middle of voting in order to either bribe somebody towards a specific outcome or scare them away from another. On Reddit, Zajetti and DM Post Demons both said that not controlling one of the planets in your home system only stops you from scoring public objectives, not secret objectives and not other points, including the points from Imperial. So, if the only thing on the board you control is Mechatol Rex and you have the Imperial strategy card, you have two options. Score points from secret objectives or from the actual use of the Imperial strategy card. Better get to playing it. Having any planet in your home system taken only stops you from scoring public objectives, which can truly change the game, whether or not you realize that. Back to Nathan H. on Discord. They say that you do not get back the tokens from the actual board during the status phase cleanup. All the tokens that you spend during the action phase are taken off the board and placed into your reinforcements, which is your outside of the game supply, before the step that you receive tokens during the status phase. So you place them all off the board into your supply and then separately take 2 out of your supply, called reinforcements, and place them on your board to redistribute any of them. Nathan wants to clarify that all of those tokens do not go back to your command sheet. You only natively get 2. My final one is not as huge as some of these. It's not as game-changing, game-breaking, completely difficult to understand, but It is the one that gets messed up the most, and I have to explain it a million times over. Using a technology for its technology specialty exhausts the planet. You cannot also use that planet for its resources or influence. If you're following the technology strategy card and you have to spend 4 resources, you cannot use the same planet to exhaust and spend those 4 resources, and you also use it for its technology specialty. It's just the one that gets messed up by my group the most. If anything from this video helped you, please leave a like and comment below what you'd like to see in part 2. If you want to support the Cardboard Crash Course, please check out the Patreon, join the Discord to talk to me, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers soon, so I'd really appreciate it. I've been Ethan. Have a great rest of your day. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.